mentioned in our talk the other day that you learn so much from your children, which is absolutely true. But I think it's just allowing me to reevaluate my values positively and remind myself how grateful for I am and how good I have it. Right. I mean, if I put my list of things that are going wrong or list of challenges up against many people out there, theirs are going to be harder. Right. So just contextualizing things that, yeah, maybe I had a bad day, or maybe things didn't go my way today or this week, or I'm going through a difficult time, but let's put it in context. I have it pretty damn good. Right. And
Hmm.
I think that just sense of gratitude makes me a happier person, makes me a kinder person. And when I'm intentional about that, when I'm intentional about growing across the landscape from a holistic perspective, I can't imagine that the impact is not positive on my children, on my marriage, and on my team at work. Right? Again, leading by example. I think if I lead with a heart of gratitude and a heart of faith, I can't see how that's going to have a negative outcome for those around me. So.
You're listening to Creative Leadership with Heart, a podcast that inspires people to take action and be the leader they were born to be. I'm Coach Rico, and I'm known for coaching and training executives, leaders, founders, and high performers at Fortune 100 businesses, startups, and more. I'm here to answer your questions about leadership and personal development while also asking you questions that can unlock your untapped potential. All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. Today we have Patrick Welde. He is a senior vice president, a senior portfolio advisor, and a certified financial planner with the Welde Group, a private wealth management team within Merrill Lynch. As of August of 2024, his group oversees over $900 million for more than 350 clients nationally. Patrick has been included on several of the Forbes annual wealth advisory rankings, and he lives outside of Philly with his wife and three kids. Patrick, how are you doing today?
Well, Rico, it's great to see you. As I said, congrats on all your success since you and I linked up years back when I was out in the Bay Area. We worked briefly together. I don't think we even knew each other that well then, but I've been watching your journey from afar, and obviously good things have come. So well deserved, and congratulations to you, and thanks for reconnecting.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And I'm excited to get to talk about your journey because it was a you took a lot of different paths to where you are today.
Sure.
So jumping right in, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your career, and we'll get into what all the steps, but like basically how did you get to where you are today? Because when we met, you were creating content.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit different. I mean, again, I grew up in the greater Philadelphia area. And I think this is, kind of defining to my journey in general. It's just being open to taking a different route than most. So I went out to California for college, went to Santa Clara University. Um, really just wanted to challenge myself. I knew I could always come home, but figured I'd give it a chance and try something new and go somewhere where I didn't know anybody. Went out to Santa Clara. It was at first, admittedly, pretty tough. Got out there, and I wasn't the big guy on campus anymore, and certainly missed home quite a bit. But very, very grateful that I stuck it out, made some lifelong friends, and had some really positive experiences across the board from an academic perspective, social perspective. We'll probably talk a little bit about boxing. I boxed there and had a pretty solid career from a boxing perspective, which was unique from an experience perspective as well. Um, I went into Santa Clara unsure about what major I would select at that point in time, but I always really enjoyed reading and writing, still do today. So I was open to possibly being an English major, although not sure what I would have realistically done with that aside from, maybe writing some content. But both my parents are in business in some extent. My father's actually my business partner here at Merrill Lynch. He's been at Merrill for almost 37 years now. My mom's a CPA. So there was always business talk at the dinner table. So I knew it was helpful to take some core business classes just to have some familiarity with the space, even if I did more of a writing type career in terms of my focus. But I got pulled more and more in terms of that direction, ended up going into the business school, studying finance, But again, at graduation, had little idea what I would do with that degree or really what my goals were. I had always had somewhat of a goal though after graduation of just giving back and serving, which I still have as a high priority today. My wife joins me with that as a high priority, which I think foundational is important for our marriage. But we both, I actually met my wife the year after college. She's from originally from Massachusetts, went to school in New Hampshire. I'm obviously from Philly, went to school in California. We ended up being roommates along with four other young professionals, young people in San Diego, where I lived for a year. She ended up living there for 3 years. Through Villanova University at the time, had a program called the Augustinian Volunteers, where essentially after graduation, you could give up a full year. They'd pay for your housing, gave you some basic essentials, and kind of put you in a position to just serve fully for a year. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to serve at an orphanage in Tijuana for a year, cross the border a few days a week. Um, did some tutoring and some activity planning at the orphanage directly, and then 1 or 2 days a week would do some fundraising and do the books for them. So really positive experience. Meanwhile, my wife was in a different role, but was helping the homeless population in San Diego. She's a nurse by training, so she was doing some work at a clinic in San Diego for predominantly the homeless population throughout that year. And throughout that year, still was uncertain as to my next step, and maybe surprisingly, because my father is one of my best friends and always has been. But I remember he came out to San Diego for a visit um, and sat down, and we just had, I think we had a beer together, and we were just talking. He said, what's the next step? Where are you going from here? What are your thoughts and what are your goals? And I said, I'm kind of just applying to finance, anything that says finance, just applying blindly to across the country, Chicago, San Francisco, New York. Like I'm open. Um, and that led to a conversation finally about, why don't you tell me what you do, Dad? Like, we had never really had that conversation. My parents have been unbelievably supportive in terms of my journey, in just allowing me to fail, allowing me to make my own decisions. I know it broke my mom's heart when I went to California. She never thought I was going to come back. So she's grateful now that I am back about a half hour from them now. But nonetheless, I said, tell me about what you do. I never really considered myself a numbers or a math guy, and I kind of always figured that's what he did as an investment manager. Um, and pretty quickly in the conversation became clear that the business that I've now been involved with for over 12 years as his partner is really, yeah, obviously you have to have some familiarity and understanding of numbers and concepts and nuances, but at the end of the day, it's a relationship business. And that's really what drove me to considering wealth management and the journey that I then undertook thereafter. Um, in joining Merrill Lynch initially, kind of at one of our national offices in New Jersey for a year, and then transitioning onto my dad's team. And even thereafter, my career's evolved in terms of what I did then versus what I do now, my roles and responsibilities. But it's been a journey, and I've been really grateful for all the people I've met throughout that journey. Like you referenced, content. You and I worked. I was actually working during my senior year at Santa Clara. Given my liking for writing, writing content, that kind of brought together my love of writing, but also my love for the sport of boxing. That's what I was writing about, right? So it was,
Yeah.
on sport, which unfortunately no longer exists to my knowledge. But writing content for that was really just kind of a passion project for me. It was cool to meet some people like yourself and stay in contact with folks. But um, that was kind of just a bridge, if you will, to kind of the greater path that God's taken me on to this point. But it's been a rewarding journey, obviously challenging at times and exploratory in me understanding myself, strengths, weaknesses, what I like, what I don't like, and just learning. I mean, I think at the end of the day, regardless of anyone's role, you want to find a position, career wise, but also personally, where you're always feeling challenged. And I can say that with three young children, my oldest is turning 5, and within the next month here, my youngest is not even 6 months. The home front is certainly busy
Right.
and challenging
Right.
for sure. And I think anyone that has kids can understand that. But on the other end of the spectrum, from a career perspective, I'm fully engaged. I genuinely enjoy what I do. And again, I think it's just the evolution of the relationships that we build in terms of our practice that makes it engaging on a day-to-day basis, and something I enjoy doing. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's all we can really ask for is to enjoy what we do and make time for
sure.
family. But I want to go back to almost an origin story. So when you were little Patrick, what was the dream? So before like, you know, just applying for a bunch of finance jobs and doing the business stuff, like what was the
Yeah.
dream?
I mean, growing up, I would say my dream was probably be in the NBA or the NFL, but at 5'9", 160 pounds, that just wasn't in the cards. So that was probably my goal. But again, I mean, maybe as I got into high school and figured that that was not going to be a realistic goal for me, maybe something in the sports industry. If people say if you weren't doing what you did and kind of took a completely different route, what might that look like? Certainly writing in some capacity was of interest to me. I've always had respect for the military. Perhaps I have a good friend and good friends that were in the military, but a good friend of mine that went to the Naval Academy. Maybe something to that extent, or um, maybe something like a physical therapy position, right, where you're dealing with
Mm.
athletes and kind of engaged in that perspective. But um, yeah, I think the path I chose alternatively, and it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback and say, hey, did I make the right decision? I feel pretty confident and comfortable that I did, and really grateful for where I am today. So
Yeah, absolutely. And we can only make decisions based on what's in front of us, right? So unless
of
there's
course,
agents and scholarships and all those things waiting for you, you kind of have to make the
yeah,
decisions that are best for you. So
sure,
with that, you have a big role now. So I want to get in this podcast is about leadership. So I'd love to ask you, what does leadership mean to you and how does it show up?
sure. So I know when we spoke the other day and just kind of talking about what topics may surface as part of today's discussion, that kind of came up. And admittedly, I would say that maybe from a verbal perspective, now we have a team of six, a practice of six here. My father and I are the partners, and we have four other really valuable members of the team. Admittedly, maybe to this point in my career, I haven't been overly, explicit in verbal communication from a leadership perspective and rallying the troops, if you will. Sometimes I think that comes off as ingenuine. I think truly throughout my journey, historically, in any role I've had, I've done my best just to focus on myself and lead by example, right? My dad always had this saying growing up, and I think the older I've gotten, the more it's rung true, and the more that I think it's applicable to most phases of life. But the saying is control the controllables, right? I can't control so many things in life, and nor can anyone. There's only so much you can control. But as we know, anxiety nonetheless creeps its head, and we become overwhelmed, right? So I think the greatest lesson I've learned, and maybe what I would tell my younger self as well, is just have confidence in yourself, trust your process and what you can control, and just leave your anxiety up to God, right? I mean, there's only so much you can control. So for me, I think leadership is just developing personal positive habits. Something now with three kids and a very quickly growing practice as a partner here that I take seriously is the fact that people are watching you. And I know you have two children of
Hmm.
your own. I mean, your kids are sponges. They're watching, right? And your team's watching too in any career. So I think I take that um, seriously in so much that I need to be accountable for myself in developing positive habits because it's probably going to influence those around me.
Absolutely. That's a great point. So control the controllables. I love that. And your dad is a very wise man. But there's also
Yeah,
something that we talked about too that you had to learn at a young age. You even had to practice a lot during college, and I'm sure you're putting it into practice now, but that's self-discipline, right? You talk about the
sure,
habits to be successful, but tell us a little bit about what kind of discipline you needed and you've had to practice to get to where you are now.
sure. So, and again, I think I've reflected on this of late in being a parent. But I know I watched my parents grind as a child, and that influenced my behaviors. I guess you could take that on one or two directions where you can feel entitled because I was blessed and I was raised in a pretty fortunate scenario. But for me, I don't know why, but I kind of took it as motivation that I see we have these things because my parents worked really hard, right? And just taking that and bringing it into my own life. So the self discipline I think was learned from my parents first and foremost. And I can even remember going back to high school, and not that I personally had a successful football career, but I just remember, always being the guy in the weight room and always being the guy doing the training in the summers and things like that. Because again, I knew from my parents that if you want anything, you have to work hard. So when I went to college and boxed in college, um, I would say in really contextualizing this as well, maybe the two greatest life experiences for me that have given me two different lessons or two different conclusions. One was boxing in college, and the second was probably working at the orphanage, right? So the boxing in college definitely fell in the camp of self discipline. I think it takes courage to get into a ring with another human being that wants to hurt you. So, and
Hmm.
know that no matter how good you are, and not that I had a great career, but I had a pretty successful career in boxing, um, you're going to get hit. You're going to get hit, right? So I don't think there's many life lessons that are better learned than whether it's the wrestling mat or the boxing gym, where you're in a ring, you can't blame anybody else. You're in there all by yourself. You're accountable for yourself, and you better prepared accordingly, or else you're probably going to lose, right? So I think the dividends that are paid in actual fights or in your career are paid because of the work you put in prior. So, in college, I know you and I were joking that I had as much fun as anyone in college, but there were periods, 3, 4 months at a time, usually in the middle of the year, where we were in the crux of the season, where we lived next to a bar my senior year, for example, like right feet away from a bar. My friends were going out to the bar, staying out till 2, 3 a.m. And I was in bed by 9:30 and up at 6 o'clock running in the morning, and then going to practice in the afternoon and getting all my schoolwork done, just staying focused. And boxing is an individual sport. I did have some really close friends that were on the team as well, but it was a pretty small team that was kind of accountable to one another. At the end of the day, you were kind of on your own
Hmm.
from a large perspective. So, being able to do that, having the courage to step into the ring, I think build a lot of self confidence and just self discipline that parlayed really well into this career, because I hear no a lot, and I certainly early in my career heard no an awful lot. I think I told you, in terms of the growth that I've allowed as part of the business, it's been 100% driven via cold calls, right? So people
Hmm.
think, cold calls were a thing of the past, but I've had a lot of success in calling executives throughout my career. And that just takes discipline again, just grinding every day coming in. I mean, there for 5, 7, even 10 years, I was just making cold calls over and over. I think the first 5 years of my career, I made over 250,000 dials, right? Which is not fun. It's not sexy. I wasn't making a lot of money. It was just banging my head against the wall, but it was just trusting the process. Again, controlling the controllables. I can control how many dials I'm making. I can't control the outcome. Let me learn from every no I get, which is a lot of no's, and try to improve, and try to learn, and try to just trust the process, and just trust that it will pay dividends at some point, and it certainly has. But yeah, I think the self
Yeah.
discipline was learned first and foremost from my parents, and then from an experience perspective was absolutely accelerated or emphasized during my time as an amateur boxer. And then early in my career, I think that's when I really had to dig deep and say, just trust the process, keep up the work, and everything that's supposed to fall into place will. So
Yeah, I mean, that's a great lesson about self-discipline, but parallel to that is like the resiliency, just talking about the resiliency you had to show and
sure.
exhibit through all of that, right?
I mean, even a joke, not to cut you off, but even a joke. My wife and I, as I said, lived together for a year. From the first week, I was like, "Hey, this girl's beautiful. I definitely want to date her." She pushed me off for the entirety of the year. Lo and behold, now we've been married for almost 9 years. So at the end
Yeah,
of the year, she rewarded my resilience as well and said, "Hey, you are a good guy. I'll give you a chance. You can take me out." And the rest is history. So even from a marital perspective, I think resilience is an important characteristic.
yeah, that's a huge lesson, right? So
Yeah,
for people listening, it's not always a no. Sometimes it's just a not yet, right?
correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so what would you say? I mean, you already talked about a lot of things you had to face and overcome, but what were some of the biggest challenges for you navigating your career and getting
Mhm.
to where you are?
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to many episodes of your podcast, and I think it's incredibly well done. I know the idea of imposter syndrome has come up several times. I think everyone faces that in some capacity. I'll be 36 soon, but going back when I was in my earlier mid 20s, and I'm trying to build our business and trying to schedule meetings with 50, 60-year olds with millions of dollars and convince them to allow me to manage that money. You need to somehow form confidence that they should trust you first and foremost. Why are they going to trust you if you don't trust yourself? Right. So I think
Hmm.
I learned that by educating myself and really trying to stay on top of things and evolving and growing myself so that I could say, sit down with a 55, 60-year-old couple when I was 25 years old and say, I know I'm good at what I'm doing and you should trust me. And I am a good human being. I'm generally trying to help you out. And this is why. But again, I think it was just building that confidence when you're getting told no over and over. That has a pretty strong effect more often than not in denting your confidence. At the end of the day, you have to just get up, trust yourself, put in the work, and maintain that confidence regardless of what comes. So again, I think we've all experienced that imposter syndrome at some point, myself included, for sure. Um, just being able to solidify that confidence in myself, I think was really important. And I think just growing holistically, right? Growing holistically as my daily goal beyond anything else, beyond growing the business or beyond just kind of arbitrarily being a good dad, doing tangible things to grow, right?
Right.
Spiritually, mentally, physically. Going back to, I know that if I'm doing things like trying to read each day, trying to pray each day, trying to exercise each day, that I'm going to be grateful that I did that as I look out 1, 3, 5 years from now. And also, it's going to affect positively, hopefully, on those around me, my kids included, right? When they're watching their shows and I'm on the couch not scrolling on my phone, but I'm actually reading a book, and they see that constantly, right? I'm trying to improve and read, or they wake up early in the morning. My daughter comes down early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. She's an early riser and comes down, and I'm on the treadmill, right, every day, or doing yoga or something. She just knows that's part of the routine. That's what we do. Or going to church on Sundays. It's no questions. That's what we do, right? Setting the
Hmm.
foundation and just trusting the process and letting everything else kind of fall into place. But I think everyone has doubts throughout every stage of life, every chapter of life. For me right now, I think I've matured a lot just in the past year or two with the intentionality that I've had, and really trying to focus on gratitude first and foremost beyond everything else.
Yeah, great segue. I was going to ask, and 100% agree with everything you just said. So people should rewind and listen to that again. Um, and the thing I wanted to ask next is, yeah, what part did, and these go hand in hand because I think
Sure.
we come from the same place with this, but what role has your faith and gratitude played in your journey so far in your life, in the way you raise your kids, in your career?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and this is certainly timely or topical. My uncle is actually a priest at Villanova University. He's actually one of the heads of the Augustinian order, which goes back to my interest in the Augustinian volunteers after college. But I had breakfast with him yesterday, and he's a phenomenal mentor, right? And whether somebody has faith or not, the reality is nowadays we live in a more secularized society, which I think challenges those of us that are faith oriented, or have a goal of maintaining a strong faith. So that, I mean, certainly I think the world in general challenges that nowadays more than ever. But I can say truthfully, and I've been very fortunate. Let me just preface it with that I really haven't. We've all had our own challenges, of course, but I've had a pretty blessed life and haven't faced half the challenges that many folks out there have. But I am hopeful that if I build this foundation of faith in my smaller trial and tribulations, that when I do inevitably face a larger challenge, a larger roadblock, that my faith will certainly bleed through to optimism and hope in that perspective as well. So, I think I was raised a Christian, a Catholic. That's always been important to my parents. I think I've always respected them and tried to be like them from a work ethic perspective and faith perspective. Fortunately, my wife shares those values as well, and we're trying to implement that in our children's lives looking forward. But I think, again, the goal is if you truly believe, you have to have that as your top priority first and foremost. And going back to the CTC, controlling what you can. I think when you just focus on what you can control, on your faith, the anxiety that we all feel inevitably to a large extent dissipates, right? So I think with
Hmm.
that, I mean, that anxiety is obviously not good for your health. I would imagine that, faith for me has maybe a healthier person because it has at times taken away some of that anxiety, maybe not eliminated it, but dissipated it to some extent. And the gratitude, I know it's become more common now in terms of meditation and gratitude journaling. I personally, I don't journal, but I can tell you that each day, that's something that I absolutely explicitly try to nail into my kids' heads, right? They get tired of hearing it, but I truly, I mean, we're so blessed that uh, before they go to sleep, we say our prayers, and I say, let's say a prayer. We're so fortunate. We have a home, we have food, we have family, we have our health. There's so many people that love us. How amazing is that, guys? Right? And again, my
Hmm.
daughter's will be 5, my son's 3, and the newborn's obviously not part of the conversation yet. But I think just reminding myself, you
1000%. The world would be a much better place if we all focused on the things we have versus the things.
mentioned in our talk the other day that you learn so much from your children, which is absolutely true. But I think it's just allowing me to reevaluate my values positively and remind myself how grateful for I am and how good I have it. Right. I mean, if I put my list of things that are going wrong or list of challenges up against many people out there, theirs are going to be harder. Right. So just contextualizing things that, yeah, maybe I had a bad day, or maybe things didn't go my way today or this week, or I'm going through a difficult time, but let's put it in context. I have it pretty damn good. Right. And
Hmm.
I think that just sense of gratitude makes me a happier person, makes me a kinder person. And when I'm intentional about that, when I'm intentional about growing across the landscape from a holistic perspective, I can't imagine that the impact is not positive on my children, on my marriage, and on my team at work. Right? Again, leading by example. I think if I lead with a heart of gratitude and a heart of faith, I can't see how that's going to have a negative outcome for those around me. So,
That we don't.
of
And
course,
and it's
of
so
course,
easy to fall into the trap of like, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, or they have it so easy. But then
of
when you
course.
put the mirror on yourself, you're like, well, look at what I do have. And do I
Right.
really have it that bad? Right? So I love
Sure.
that. Um,
Yeah.
One thing I want to get into is into your practice. So you talk about in your practice, you're not just a wealth advisor, financial advisor, all those things from a financial perspective, but you also you use the words holistic and intimate in how you present your practice and your business. Can you explain
Sure.
to the listeners what that means? Especially it is a little bit different when it comes from someone who helps you with your finances. Thinking of holistic and intimate, you think more of like wellness when you hear those words.
Sure. Yeah. So as I said, I mean, early in my career, I think I very quickly learned how much of what we do in wealth management is relationship based. Right now, that said, I have the training and the licenses and the designations. I know enough about what I'm guiding on that is essential and table stakes. But at the end of the day, I think the greatest value I add is genuinely getting to know clients. Money is an intimate matter in itself, right? That people like to hold oftentimes their finances close to the chest. So it's a vulnerable position for somebody to open up and share their financial situation with you, their concerns, their positive or negative past experiences, what they're trying to achieve, their goals and aspirations. Those conversations are intimate. So I think I have to do my best to create a facility of trust, right? And a facility of us trying to work together in a partnership, right? Which is certainly intimate. And then holistic, I think that can be credited to several things. I mean, holistic in so much that I'm trying to help the clients holistically with different desires, different goals, and really trying to balance their own behaviors and emotions and thoughts and maybe misconceptions with the reality and what we're seeing and doing, but also from a solutions perspective, right? Where my dad will tell you, I mean, when he started in the 80s, he was a stockbroker. right? Pretty straightforward. Hey, we were positive on this stock versus another, and you bought or sold a stock. The business, the industry has completely evolved, right? Where now people can trade on their own. So there's not really value in that. The value is, I think, the backbone of having someone, a personal CFO, if you will, who you know and trust as your backbone for your financial situation. I always joke with clients, there's no reason for you ever make a silly or a stupid financial decision from here on out, because you're going to have to, stress test it through me before we make the decision together, right? And we'll have an open conversation. But holistically, where it was just previously investments, and even the investment landscape has completely evolved. I mean, we can do some really unique things beyond just stocks and bonds in terms of private equity, private credit, hedge funds. A lot of, we can make as complicated as you want on the investment side. But from a planning perspective, now things like trust planning, estate planning, long-term healthcare planning, banking, it all coincides, right? So I think, to answer your question, the intimacy is just the fact that money itself is an intimate topic. And I think a successful relationship in our business is genuinely listening and being a dependable sounding board and knowledgeable person for someone to depend on financial matters. But beyond that, holisticness, I think, goes with addressing all capacities and all facets of their life with a wider base of solutions that are available now versus 10, 20, 30 years
Yeah, that's fantastic.
ago.
And we'll get into how people, if they want to work with you, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I want to
Mm-hmm.
get into now some. This is a podcast for people to get advice, also to learn from. Uh, what you said a little bit about it earlier. You know, you would, I forget what you said, you put the self-discipline. But what other thing would you, whatever piece of advice would you give your younger self or folks out there that are trying to navigate their careers, trying to figure out what they want to do?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it takes time to figure it out. I think, not that I'm a huge Gary V guy, but we see Gary V on different, social media and whatnot. And I
Right.
saw an interview with him recently where he was saying, everything's so immediate nowadays that when you're in your 20s, you expect to have it figured out. And that's just so far from the truth that it takes time. It takes time to learn what your strengths and weaknesses are. It takes time to figure out optimal roles and responsibilities and routines, right? And I think routines are huge. I mean, it takes time to implement those and to figure out what is optimal for you personally. Um, but I think I mentioned when we spoke the other day, early on, and there was nothing wrong with this, but I think my mindset has changed within the past couple of years where, um, in the first 5 to 10 years of my career, it was certainly just grind, 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 right? Keep your head down. You have to be the first in, the last out, make the most styles, and just keep it moving as much volume as you can. And perhaps that also bled into other parts of life, like enjoy it. We're gonna go hard and party this weekend. Like it was just nonstop and trying to be busy and um, really as busy as possible. Where I think once you settle into your 30s and have a family, your mindset just changed. Things slow down to some
Hmm.
extent, they speed up in others, but I think you really have to have an honest conversation with yourself about your personal priorities. And now I would say my mindset is less about just grinding and being as busy as possible, and more so about being as efficient as possible, and finding balance, right, for my marriage, for my kids, and for optimization on the work front. So, in terms of advice, I think it's be patient, right? Be patient, have an open heart, find mentors, and listen as best you can, because I think we have a tendency to just talk, 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 but I think a better MO, if you will, is to listen, listen, listen. So, I mean,
Yep.
I think the more people you seek out in terms of mentorships in different capacities of life, right? Going back again to spiritual, mental, career wise, physical, find people that you respect and seek them out and listen to them. And then not everything they're going to say is going to be applicable to you, but go back to your life and try to shuffle around and find the priorities that are important to you, and then just be open to trying different things and challenging yourself, right? I think that's a huge thing now where you hear it often, and right or wrong, I do think we live in a softer world now than was the case 20 years ago, and that has positives and negatives to it. But I think with some of that is the idea of challenges or personal self discipline and really forcing yourself to be uncomfortable at times. Um, Maybe is not always there or a top priority for folks. I do think that growth only comes through challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're exploring things on your journey, push yourself, right? I'm not saying push yourself to be as busy as possible, but try as many different things as you can and try things that you think are hard because that's how you grow. And I think that's how you gain confidence and that's how you find out who you are and where you want to go.
100%. You need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable if you want
Yeah.
to continue to grow, right? Take on
I
the
always
challenges
too,
because
and
it's
throughout this evolution, I always too. My wife always jokes that I have this saying of a bunker guy or a foxhole guy or gal, where there's a lot of things that go on in life, and not that my goal is certainly not to judge people, but I'll be with a good friend or a colleague or something, or have a really good conversation with somebody and get to know them, and we'll be in the car after wherever we were, and I'll say to my wife, yeah, I want that person in my foxhole, right? When things get tough, I want that person in my foxhole, and frankly, it's not a lot of
mhm,
people, right? That I think I really would trust in a very difficult scenario when things hit the fan to have courage. I mean, I was tearing up last week was 9/11, and I know we've seen the story in the past, but you see all these demonstrations of courage that happened on 9/11. The one that particularly hit hard for me this year, I was crying at my desk, and I don't think I'm an easy cry, but was looking through the transcript of Todd Beamer, right? So Todd Beamer was on Flight 93, um, and he was the guy that said "Let's roll," right, and took out the hijackers, and they crashed the plane. They think the plane was headed for the Capitol building, I believe. But he called 911, I believe, and was talking to the woman. First and foremost, he prayed with the woman. He was incredibly calm throughout the entire scenario. He told the woman which this is what hit hard for me. I mean, he had a 3-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a baby on the way, and just said, I've lived a good life, but tell my wife that I love her, and tell my kids that I'll love them forever, right? And he stepped up, and he was calm, very calm, said a prayer, and said, "Let's roll," and did what he had to do. I mean, that I don't know if I would have the courage that he had in that circumstance. I pray that I would, but that's a bunker guy. That's a foxhole guy, right? So
mhm.
that is my goal now. Where yeah, you have to be open to things. You have to hold yourself accountable. But at the end of the day, right now, I want to be that guy. Be that guy, right? In a society where things are getting softer, in a society that is more secular, in a society that everything seems so fluid now, be the guy, be the gal that has a strong foundation, knows who they are, and is courageous when things are tough. Right. And I think for my role in terms of my career, that's who people also have confidence in from a financial perspective.
Right.
Right. I can't say I'm there. I think it's a journey that I'll always be on in trying to be that guy. But that's my personal goal now is be that guy. Be that guy that your wife's proud of, your parents are proud of, your kids are proud of. Be that guy. They're watching. Everybody's watching. Be that guy. Hold yourself accountable. Be disciplined. Find that foundation, and then again, control the controllables and let everything fall into place. Trust God. Right. So I think again, coming back to CTC, control the controllables, put your anxiety on the table, be open to change, be open to challenges is the greatest thing I think I can leave people with in terms of finding their place in this world.
Yeah, I love everything that you said, and I'm hoping everyone starts to use CTC and it becomes a part of society. Um, so it's a good segue. You mentioned mentorship played a big role in your life. So a two-part question. One is if there's any other, you mentioned your uncle already, which is great. If there's any other mentors you want to call out, but also how do you find them? How do you get mentors? Like, what was your how did you get people to sit down and chat with you and participate
Sure.
in your growth?
Yeah, so I mean, I think again, it's in different capacities of life. My uncle has always been helpful from a faith-based perspective. Um, I try to get breakfast with him at least quarterly. He's so busy, but try to get breakfast with him quarterly. My both my parents have been incredible supporters, and I'm forever indebted to them for all the support they've given me and allowing me to find my own path. And they're always, I'm very comfortable having very vulnerable conversations with them and with my wife, and I'm blessed for that. Beyond that, I think it's from a work perspective. Early on, I was constantly asking questions of everyone in our office. Right, I'm fortunate we're in our Philadelphia office here. There's a lot of advisors, male and female, who have been here for now 20, 30, 40 plus years. Um, and we're just very open to being a resource, right? And I would sit down and I would ask questions and I would just take notes. And it wasn't like I had one mentor in that perspective or that capacity, but was just finding successful people, seeking them out. And I've never had an issue in approaching people, right? Approaching and saying, hey, I want to be successful like you. Tell me how you've done it. And just listening to their story, and maybe as challenges popped up or curiosities popped up, going back and saying, hey, I'm in this scenario now. What would you do here? Right. And then also
Hmm.
just from a friendship perspective, I think mentors often are thought of as people older than oneself or more experienced. I have a couple of friends that I try to similarly get breakfast with at least quarterly. And I think part of it is just having an open dialogue with them. They're people that again, going back, a mentor is someone I think that you respect and trust, right? And who's successful in your eyes and who you want to get to become more like from a successful perspective. So finding even friends that are maybe more similar in terms of your age, which maybe goes against the grain in terms of normal mentor, but someone that you respect and kind of an accountability partner, right? So I think it's
Hmm.
never be afraid to ask. I think right or wrong, people like talking about themselves. So most people, if you say, "Hey, I really respect you. I would love to be successful like you. How have you done it?" There's not many people that are going to brush you off there. And then
Right,
once that
right.
relationship is formed, I think they can be helpful in trying to answer questions or help you along your journey as things pop up. So
And I love that you also mentioned that age doesn't matter, right? Because
yeah,
whenever I enter like a mentor-mentee relationship, it's never one way, right? Because there's
yeah,
things about technology trends and things that
sure,
maybe I'm not privy to or aware of that they will ask questions about like, oh, actually, I don't know about that. Why don't you tell me
sure,
what you're seeing and what you're experiencing,
sure,
right? So it's never, these things are never one way. And
never,
whether you feel like you have value or not, you do have value to offer to everyone around you. It's just
absolutely.
whether you step up and provide that value,
And it's because everyone has different life experiences, right?
right?
So I think we all, I mean, now the world is so polarized and the country is so polarizing, which I think is a shame. We're all human beings, right? We all struggle at times. We all are scared at times. We all suffer from the same things. I think to a large extent, we have much more in common than different. And I
Hmm.
think regardless of what your title says or who you are, we all can learn from each other's experiences, right? And I think we all need more of that. We all need more of just having open, honest dialogues. People are going to disagree with you. That's okay, right? I think though, from differing perspectives, you will learn things, and that's going back to the idea of growth. That's a really important part of the journey is being open, listening, and being engaged with people coming from different perspectives because more often than not, that's where you learn the most.
And taking it back to the faith, right? If everyone had just a little bit more compassion and empathy, I
Yeah,
think we'd also be in a much better place,
for
right?
sure.
Uh,
Yeah,
so, Patrick, if people want to get in touch with you, work with you, you know, maybe ask you to mentor them, like what's the best place for people
sure.
to get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people can reach out. Our website, I think you're going to drop in the description
In the show
there.
notes. Yep.
Feel free to. So click on the website, and I think you can reach out to me directly on there. My business email is just patrick.d as in Daniel .welde WELDE at ML as in Merrill Lynch.com. My business line is 610-668-6125. And even my cell phone, which I'm happy to give, is 610-306-1060. I'm happy to have conversations, again, to your point, even if someone wants to reach out and thinks I can be a mentor, there's a pretty high likelihood I can learn from them as well. So I'm always open to having conversations, learning from others, and just keeping the dialogue open. So yeah, feel free to reach out, whether it's on a business front, whether it's on a personal front. I'd love to talk to people.
Fantastic. We'll link the. Well, also, is LinkedIn also a good place? That's where you and I keep in touch. Is
LinkedIn's
that a
great.
good place
Yeah,
for people?
LinkedIn's
Okay.
great. People can work on LinkedIn alternatively. Sure.
So we'll have your email, your web address, and LinkedIn. You're the first person on the podcast that ever dropped digits. So
Well, hopefully they end
that-
up in the right hands, but I can ignore a call as easy as anybody. So if people, yeah, we're all getting spammed anyway, so it's all good. But no, I mean, from a business perspective, definitely reach out on the formal business line. If it's from a personal, just contact perspective, feel free to reach out from that standpoint. So yeah.
cool. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing your journey with us. I learned a lot, and we got to talk about some things that we haven't had on the podcast before. So thank you for taking the time. Um, yeah, and really appreciate you being here.
For sure. Again, I appreciate you reconnecting with me. Congratulations on all your success. Um, the podcast has been phenomenal. The episodes I've listened to, I've definitely learned from, and I think to my point, you brought on a very diverse population of people onto the podcast, and that's awesome. I mean, that's too often now. I think different platforms have one point of view and one focus, and it gets a little too narrow. I think to your credit, it's been a pretty um, broad array of folks you brought on with very different viewpoints that just only adds to the value you're providing. So congrats to you. And again, thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, sir. Well, this has been another episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. Thank you again to Patrick. Thank you all for listening. We will see you all in the next one.
Thank you, Rico.
I'm gonna have to. Something's on. I have the beach ball. Okay. Well, it'll. I'll edit the end part, but yeah, thank you for taking the time to be on.
For sure, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. If you're ready to make huge, lasting change in your life, then what are you waiting for? What will your life look like if you took action today? What would it look like if you didn't? If you're serious and you're ready, book your free strategy session today, and let's make your future a reality.